And let me just start by thanking Unions 21, not just for convening today's discussion, but obviously all the work that you do much more broadly. Really challenging unions to think creatively and to think big about our future. Challenging sometimes the sort of the default mindset in the trade union movement, which is this is the way we've always done things, so this is the way we will always continue to do things, and thinking big about some of the challenges that we face as a movement as well. And I'll pick some of those up in a moment. Although I do have to say, Becky, having sat through Boris Johnson's Peppa Pig anecdote, I was a bit worried where Postman Pat was going, but I think it worked. I'm going to keep my remarks brief. I mean, to the relief of some, the disappointment of even fewer, I am not going to do a big tub-thumping speech. I thought maybe just to give a few more sort of reflections on the Employment Rights Bill and what it means for unions. Peter's going to be talking from the CIPD, and I think there's an opportunity for us to reflect on each other's remarks and maybe some wider discussion as well. But I want to really focus on the Employment Rights Bill itself, where we're up to now in terms of the process, why it's important. Talk importantly about the opportunities for unions, and then maybe talk about some of those big shared challenges that I mentioned before. Before I do that, I think it's probably worthwhile saying a few words about the wider political and economic environment, because the Employment Rights Bill doesn't exist in a vacuum, and I think if we're having a serious discussion about the Employment Rights Bill, we need to think about where it fits into the current political and economic context. Interesting times politically at the moment. In fact, I'd say interesting, challenging and volatile as well. So politically, last July, we had Labour swept to power with a huge majority, a shallow majority, but a huge majority after 14 years of Conservative government. Less than 18 months on, what is it, 16 months on from that election victory, the government are trailing well behind in the polls. Our Prime Minister, depending on what you believe in the press, is under threat of a leadership challenge. What is clear is that he is one of the most, if not the most unpopular Prime Minister in modern political times. And at the same time, we've seen the rise of reform. 4 million votes at the last general election, 10 local councils won in the last local elections, polling consistently 7 or more points ahead in the polls. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment, but I think it's also important to recognise this is a phenomenon not just in the UK. Right across the US, Europe, we've seen mainstream politics ditched in favour of the populist right, whether that's Trump in the White House, Meloni in Italy, Milei in Argentina, Orban in Hungary, the rise of the AfD in Germany, FN in France. This is something that is happening right across democracies, as I say, in the Americas and in Europe. Economically, those political challenges, I think, are mirrored. And you can trade the statistics backwards and forwards, but it is clear the UK economy, in common with many economies across Europe, is struggling to get any sort of meaningful growth at all. There are some short to medium term pressures responsible for that, whether that's the impact of Brexit, the impact of tariffs, of energy prices, the pressure on our public services, which has a direct impact on the ability of companies to go about the business here in the UK and our infrastructure. But we know there are some big long-term issues as well that were exacerbated under the last government, but weren't unique to the last government. So Britain's performance long run on productivity, on skills, on investment, big challenges for us all. And I suppose if you take all of that, it adds up to a public mood where, and we can't, we represented the TUC directly, through our 47 unions, 5.5 million workers. All of those will have slightly different views, but a sense amongst many of our members that mainstream politics just isn't delivering for them. That the change that Labour promised at the last election is being slow coming, if it's coming at all, and people feeling disillusioned. Nothing works as well as it used to do. Britain is broken, choose whatever expression you want. So I think that really does place the responsibility on the government to deliver meaningful change, to deliver a growing economy, yes, but a growing economy that is actually felt in people's pockets. Because our members don't care if GDP goes up 1 or 2 or 3 or 4%. If their living standards continue to decline, if their wages don't go up, then they don't have that feel-good factor at all. And this is, so that's maybe by way of introduction. Let me talk about the Employment Rights Bill, because I think there's a direct link across from that sense that Labour has to deliver change, and the Employment Rights Bill and the broader Make Work Pay agenda. It is clear that part of that delivering change is making sure that people are in decent, secure, well-paid employment. That makes a big difference to people up and down the country. I was in Rolls-Royce yesterday, Outstanding company, supports thousands of good quality UK jobs. It's a bit of an outlier, not just in the East Midlands, but in the UK as overall, because we've got far too many companies in the UK that have become reliant on an insecure, low-paid model of employment. 1.2 million people on zero-hours contracts, 4 million people in some form of vulnerable employment. 70% of the kids who live in poverty have at least one parent who goes out to work. For far too many of our members, going out to work doesn't deliver what it used to deliver 15, 20 years ago, which is the ability not just to get by, but to take the family on holiday once or twice a year, or to take the kids to the pitches if you fancied it, or to go out for a nice meal occasionally, or to pop down to the pub. So make work pay, doing what it says on the tin, making work pay and making work rewarding for all sorts of people, I think is really important. And the only other thing point I'd make, and increasingly I get this when I talk to different groups of union members, quite often when we talk about the Employment Rights Bill, the focus is understandably on those right on the sharp end of the labour market. Speak to teachers. I mean, this was a profession that most people would have regarded 20 years ago as a solidly middle-class profession. It was a profession where you could have a decent life as a teacher. Not many people feel that that's the case now, and for teachers you could take a whole range of different professions. I'm not going to talk to this audience about what's in the Employment Rights Bill, because most people will know a whole huge range of individual rights, including day one rights to sick pay, day one protections against unfair dismissal, protections against fire and rehire, bereavement leave, right to flexible, default flexible working, and so on. The one thing I would stress is that in the Employment Rights Bill, importantly for unions as well, is collective rights. And this is something our executive met last week, and we're very clear. We want to see the bill delivered in full and in a timely way. We can talk a little bit more about the timing in a moment. But those collective rights are really fundamental as well. So simplifying the union recognition procedure, union rights to access the workplace, the right to access workers digitally, enhanced compensation where employers use unfair labour practices, employers having to tell their staff about the right to join a union, and crucially, that first fair pay agreement in social care and the reinstatement of the school support staff negotiating a body. A huge range of positive changes, and I suppose my only final reflection on the content of the bill itself, Becky, is looking around this room, and there's some people who've been activists for a few years, and there's some, you can see us, who've been here a lot longer. This will be the first time that any government in my trade union lifetime has repealed anti-union legislation, the Trade Union Act 2016 and that minimum services level legislation, and that will be significant. So delivering the Employment Rights Bill, it's good for workers. We believe it's good for decent employers. It levels the playing field for decent employers. It's good for the UK economy, because guess what? When working people are in secure, good employment, they have the confidence to go out and spend in the economy. But it is also crucial for the government politically. This is about one of the only things the government has got that is popular right across the universal spectrum. And it doesn't matter whether you voted Labour at the last election, or you voted Reform, or Conservative, or Lib Dem, there is clear support for the Employment Rights Bill in every single constituency in the country, including Clacton-on-Sea. This is a dividing issue between Labour and Reform, and it's one where the government is on the right side of public opinion. And it's also important because this was part of their manifesto commitment, and it's important the government delivers that promise of change that I spoke about before. So working to secure the bill in full, royal assent before Christmas, our primary objective, and then making sure that the secondary legislation is fit for purpose. And then I think there's a whole set of work for us to do with employers and others to make sure that employers and union reps are equipped to deal with these changes, understand the changes, trained to deal with the changes, and are confident about the changes. Second set of issues for me, and this section gets quicker, Becky, so don't worry about the time. All the rights in the world are worth nothing if you're not able to exercise those rights. Now, the Fair Work Agency, we want to see properly resourced and playing an effective role, but that is no substitute for strong trade unions in workplaces. And likewise, all the new union rights in the world are worth nothing. They're not going to recruit a single trade union member anywhere. That's going to have to be our job and our responsibility. And I think we have to really grasp the nettle in terms of thinking about, are we equipped for dealing with the Employment Rights Bill when it comes into effect? We had a really good session at our executive last week with the Australian trade unions, where they've seen membership grow by 12%. I think 260,000 new young workers joining Australian unions as a direct result of their employment reforms, and enterprise bargaining, their sort of collective bargaining at workplace level, going up by 27% over the last couple of years. That's the sort of impact that we want to have with the Employment Rights Bill here in the UK. So that means making sure we've got the capacity to take advantage of those new rights, including the right to access, including that we're up to speed digitally to be able to take advantage of that new right to access workers digitally. That unions work together, not compete. I mean, one of the best bits about being General Secretary with the TUC rather than Deputy General Secretary is I don't normally do inter-union disputes anymore. I get to pass that on to someone else. But it is frankly depressing dealing with disputes between unions over 60 or 70 or 80 or even a few thousand members when there are 20-odd million people out there not members of any union whatsoever. And it also gives us an opportunity, I think, to focus on renewing our rep space and in particular to make sure our rep space is diverse and inclusive. So on all of those areas of work, the TUC is working with our affiliates to make sure we're ready for the Employment Rights Bill. Our Solidarity Hub, which has been providing support to unions in dispute, is refocusing to be a growth and recognition hub. We are working with unions to think about how we boost digital capacity, everything from the basics, membership systems, through to how we use it to support organising our work on social media, data mining, and so on. And we are very serious as well about making sure that we put in place the right processes for our unions to work together. So I won't talk too much about this because it's sort of, one, it's boring, but two, it's internal, but making sure that our disputes, principles and procedures, the old Bridlington procedures, are up to standard. We're also going to carry out a root and branch review of trade union education as well to make sure that we are delivering. It's very difficult now in terms of formal accreditation and funding because of that sort of almost postcode lottery around trade union education. We know there are other providers in different spaces as well. Making sure that we are equipped to support that next generation of reps and to bring through, we've done a lot of work, for example, with cohorts of black reps to make sure our reps are more representative. And I was at an event with a group of our reps in Birmingham about 3 weeks ago, Reps Connect, 350 reps from right across the movement. And there were more women, more black and Asian reps in that room than I think I've ever seen in any TUC event, and we want to make sure that's replicated in everything that we do. Third and final set of issues for me, because the Employment Rights Bill, getting onto the statute book, important, making sure we're taking advantage of the opportunities, important, you know, sort of, I want to use the Employment Rights Bill, the Employment Rights Bill will drag our employment law back into the mainstream, looking a little bit more like our European comparators. But I want to use it also to make sure that unions are dragged back into the mainstream and seen as part of the mainstream right across the economy. We are in the public sector, we are in part of the private sector. In other parts of the private sector, we know we are a minority sport. So I want unions to be the default setting for firms and organisations right across the UK economy. And I think that there are a whole range of big shared challenges that we do need to work on with governments and with employers. I mean, one of the, I was going to say some of the employers' representatives are my best friends. That wouldn't be entirely true, Peter, would it? But we've got a good working relationship. I've got good working relationships with all the employers' organisations. I have to say those relationships have been tested during the last 12 months or so because there's been a very sharp set of issues around the Employment Rights Bill. My hope is that once we've got the primary legislation over the line, we get into the practical nitty-gritty of how's this going to work in practice through the secondary legislation. But we also start thinking about some of the bigger issues that face us all collectively as well. I've mentioned productivity already, skills, where we know UK investment in skills is about half the EU average, but not just those issues, just transition. The TUC at the moment, we've got project workers working with our unions in automotive, in steel, in chemicals, thinking about supporting employers to make the transition to net zero. Jaguar Land Rover, I was there a couple of weeks ago, fantastic. Of course, they've got relationships with their unions, they're working on these issues all the time, but the companies in the supply chain aren't. I'm really thinking about how we provide support to those companies is just as important as the support we provide to the likes of JLR. Likewise, on the transition on AI and digital, huge range of issues there, everything from monitoring and surveillance and management by AI and making sure that we mitigate and manage that, manage the transition itself, which means supporting our members to reskill and to retrain, and in some cases to change jobs and employment, but also the digital dividend. I mean, you don't have to be an economist to recognise that we're in a situation where increasingly we've got a small number of very large tech companies that don't actually employ very large numbers of people who are making huge profits, and none of us are seeing the benefit of that. So we're closing down Venice for weddings for billionaires and sending people up into space, but we're struggling to find the funding for our public services. And I think there's a big debate to be had about the digital dividend and how that is secured. Other issues, migration, how we move the debate away from the toxic debate that the far right are propagating around everything to do with migration is about small boats, and how we turn this into a debate that's values-based and recognition of respect for those who come and travel to live and work here, but also making sure that the rules are fair for everybody. And our relationship with the European Union as well. And, you know, we can talk about Nigel Farage to a blue in the face, but, I mean, there are lots of reasons why I don't want to see Nigel Farage in number 10. I think there's lots of reasons why good employers wouldn't want to see him in number 10 as well. Our trading relationship with Europe, our ability to hold our society together, the state of our public services, all of these things matter to us and matter to employers as well. So I'm under no illusion. I've been a trade union activist for various kinds for the last 36 years or so. I've been through various iterations of Labour governments as well. Back in the 97 Labour government, we had the formal launch, I think it was in 2000, of the Partnership Institute. Did some good work alongside the work we did on the TUC Organising Academy. I think if we're also true, we signed a lot of partnership agreements in that time that weren't actually partnership agreements. They were just crappy agreements. And so it's disentangling good partnership and genuine partnership working and those sorts of agreements. But we do want to be working in partnership with employers. And as I say, I get the privilege to go in unionised workplaces up and down the country, not just the Rolls-Royces of this world, but distribution centres in our public services and elsewhere as well. And where you see good, robust relationships between unions and employers, and relationships based on mutual respect, I think it is good for employers and it's good for the people we represent as well. So a huge set of opportunities presented by the Employment Rights Bill. I'm under no illusion about some of the challenges and potential pitfalls as well, but this is our moment and we've got to seize it. Thanks very much.